Tonight on News 5 Live, brush fires and forest fires have been wreaking havoc around the country. Air tankers are deployed to contain the blazes. Further away in the south, a $1 million cacao farm goes up in flames. And the last confirmed COVID-19 case was 16 days ago. Director of Health Services Marvin Manzanero warns not to let your guard down. Compol Chester Williams says that San Pedro Town Council's regulations are illegal, and his department will not support any measures outside of the national state of emergency. Williams says Minister Heredia has been informed and the issue rectified. And the LPG war rages as importers' licenses expire. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
Smart está totalmente preparado para las demandas de nuestra red para facilitar a los que trabajan desde casa y para que los clientes continúen comunicando con amigos y familiares. Con todo el país recluidos en casa, nuestro equipo ha impulsado servicios y promociones más innovadores como nuestros datos dobles, junto con nuevas formas de comprar servicios móviles a través de nuestra aplicación y agentes en todo el país. Smart se enorgullece de tener personal dedicado trabajando desde casa, así como en el campo para mantener la comunicación continua. Nuestros clientes también pueden seguir nuestro gimnasio en línea, ciencia, comedia y otros grandes segmentos para permanecer activos en casa. Smart también ha patrocinado la línea directa gratuita del Ministerio de Salud. Además, obsequio a todo el personal médico de primera línea un número de prepago con tiempo aire de $50 para mantenerse en contacto en estos tiempos. Tenga por seguro que estamos con usted y busca más promociones semanales en SMS, voz y datos. Sea Smart y manténgase a salvo.
With over 100 years of service excellence in Belize, the Belize Bank Limited recognizes the importance of leading the way as we enter into this fast-growing technological world. Our Belize Bank mobile banking app virtually places a number of banking capabilities in the palm of our customers' hands, anytime, anywhere, through the use of their Android or iOS devices. The Belize Bank, delivering a convenient and enhanced banking experience to meet the demands of our customers' digital lifestyle. The Belize Bank, our country, your bank.
As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to affect the lives of all Belizeans, Channel 5 is keeping you informed of all the latest developments. For an insightful look at the week's events across the country, tune in to Uncovering COVID-19, a Channel 5 special every Friday at 8 p.m. Join host William Neal and his guest panelists as they provide in-depth analysis on the impact that COVID-19 is having on all of us from a health, economic, and legal point of view. Don't miss this informative and significant television program, Uncovering the COVID-19 Pandemic, every Friday night at 8, only on Channel 5.
Belize is the only country in the region that does not have an LPG marine terminal. In other words, we depend on other countries in the region to get our cooking gas. Several years ago, the government of Belize reached out to the Belizean private sector to provide the funding so that Belize could access world markets for cooking gas directly. We knew that importing LPG directly to Belize was an expensive undertaking, but key to unlocking improved pricing, a diversity of gas products, and LPG security for the Belizean people. It was because of this funding that Belize shall have a national gas company of its own. Currently, LPG is shipped from the US Gulf Coast, completely bypassing Belize and onto the terminals in Guatemala and Honduras. The LPG is then trucked to Belize through Guatemala. All the other countries in our region have realized through the years that long transportation systems such as this negatively affect the cost of LPG and have therefore invested in terminals of their own. Why should Belize stay behind? The government of Belize and Belize's private sector have partnered to develop the National Gas Company Belize Limited. NGC is majority owned by Belizeans, including the government of Belize, with important and welcome foreign direct investment. NGC has invested over $60 million to develop Belize's first modern gas terminal with storage capacity of over 1.5 million gallons. The facilities are strategically located as per Government of Belize request in the northern
Stay healthy while traveling. Frequently wash hands with soap and clean running water or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Avoid touching eyes, nose, and mouth. Avoid close contact with persons suffering from any cold or flu-like symptoms. Avoid travel if you have any cold or flu-like symptoms. Avoid travel unless Ministry of Health.
Welcome to News 5 Live for Wednesday, April 29th. I am Marlene Cuellar. In addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, the country is facing another crisis. It has to do with the bush and forest fires that have been spreading all over the country. In the Cayo district, the situation has become unbearable as the fires and smoke levels threaten the health and property of residents. The fires have been spreading quickly, destroying the forests and harming wildlife. Today, PACT partnered with government agencies to provide area water bombing services to bring the fires under control. The first deployment was in Belmopan. Here's News 5's Isani Cayetano with that report.
The fight to contain a number of wildfires that are consuming the wooded fringes of Belmopan is a concerted effort between the municipal administration, the Forest Department, and the Protected Areas Conservation Trust. This morning, shortly after 5 o'clock, a team from Airmax Limited, a local aviation company, gathered at the Hector Silva airstrip to commence the first of several operations. Using a pair of water trucks, an air tanker is filled with 400 gallons of water before taking off to specific areas along the periphery of the Garden City. On the ground elsewhere, Mayor Khalid Belal is working with another team to douse a fire that is burning along the Hummingbird Highway.
We've been plagued by these fires annually. I mean, this is nothing new to us, but mixed with the extreme heat that we had been experiencing, particularly in last week, it's really put together a combination of the perfect conditions for these brush fires to really kick into another gear.
As many as 6 brush fires in different locations encircling Belmopan have been tackled over the past week. Today, the Ministry of the Environment got involved with the effort. Chief Executive Officer Dr. Percival Cho is leading government's charge.
The effort has been ongoing for the past 3 or 4 days on the ground using the support of the Belmopan Fire Service, as well as the Forestry Department and the Belmopan City Council. But the number of fires are such that it's difficult to address each one satisfactorily during the day. When the wind picks up, you're fighting the wind, the temperature rises, you're fighting the temperature, the humidity drops, and then you're fighting humidity. And then you're fighting 6-7 fires at the same time. So the need for air support was considered vital, very important. And so we arranged to have some support being provided through the Protected Areas Conservation Trust.
Earlier this month, the country began experiencing large agricultural fires that were intentionally set, causing smoke levels that have resulted in poor air quality conditions for residents in communities on the outskirts of and in Belmopan proper.
It's just a general health hazard on a whole, and then that's exacerbated for people who have respiratory problems from the get-go. So it's really just a major inconvenience. You know, it makes life difficult. You wash your clothes, you pin them out. By the time you pick them in, you know, it's like you're bringing a plate of barbecue into the house. But more, I think residents are far more concerned about the health aspect of it. It's making for miserable nights at night. I'm not on social media, but I get all the complaints forwarded to me, of course.
And those complaints are numerous. Despite the Forest Department receiving assurances from farmers within the area, fires are still being lit for slash and burn purposes. The use of the aircraft today, says Dr. Cho, is to test whether it is effective in quelling the fires to allow for a ground team to go in and extinguish what's left on the scene.
We were testing it here in Belmopan, primarily one to control the smoke and to kind of use the steam to zap some energy from the fire and put it out, and then allow the ground teams to go in and have a better chance of stomping out all the burning stumps. You know, they don't have to fight the fire as such, and then just work on the residual stumps that are still smoldering.
The effort of the Belmopan City Council has been persistent since Saturday, taking on each brush fire in an attempt to reduce the haze that has blanketed the municipality.
We've had a good collaboration with the business community who have loaned us water trucks and the like in terms of trying to get them extinguished and under control as best we can. These guys have been putting in long hours from 7 in the morning till 7 at night most days, and at this point we woke up this morning feeling good about where we are.
In a bid to preserve the biodiversity as well as human health, PAX has committed $100,000 for aerial water bombing to aid with the national response to the worst wildfires in the country's history. Reporting for News 5, I am Isani Cayetano.
The forest fires are caused by a number of environmental factors, such as the current high temperatures. The Vaca forest has experienced the largest wildfire affecting the biodiversity of the protected area. And as the unprecedented fires started to spread closer to the village of Sacuts in the Cayo district, residents sprung into action to contain the blaze and protect farms and other properties. News 5's Isani Cayetano was in the west and files the following report.
Approximately 4 miles outside of Sacuts village, a community effort led by Edgar Khan is underway. These men have been here for several days and are working tirelessly to arrest the spread of a wildfire that threatens to damage farmland as well as other properties surrounding the village.
Well, we started Saturday. We saw that a lot of smoke was in the village, and so we decided to get a group together. And then, like around 2 p.m., we started at the back of Sacuts, right? Because we have a big, like 80 acres of private property, right? And fire was there, and smoke was coming to the village, into the village. So we get a good amount of helpers, right, from the community. It was like around 40 to 50 of them. Yes.
When you say the back of Sacuts village, how far away are we at this point where we stand?
Like 4 to 5 miles. It's located by the Cave World Adventure. It's was to be a tourist site, right? Yes. So that's where we are right now.
Residents are worried that if the fire is not brought under control, it will consume everything in its path, including hundreds of acres of arable land.
Well, the fear is that, as you know, the smoke and also the fire, because we have farmers at the back of the village, right? If you come from the village to this side, you will see that it's like you have like maybe 50 farmers, right? And they have cows and cattle production, sheep and all those stuff, but at the same time it's at the back of the village, so we have to see for the community, right? Because it's affecting, and then a lot of the villagers, they were complaining, right, about the smoke. And then also the what we noticed is that the chairman, like he was not into this, right? So we say, you know, let's get a group together, and that's what we are doing now.
This seems tedious and backbreaking, to be climbing the hillside and trying to clear a path so that the fire doesn't cross into this area. Explain to us the process. What does this take, and what kind of work are we seeing here?
Well, what we are doing is that we're opening like a walkway, so that, you know, the fire could extinguish, right? So that it doesn't continue to the next side.
Since 7 a.m., the team has cleared almost 3 miles of foliage from the forest floor in anticipation that the fire would not spread beyond the clearance.
We have to supervise it, right? So what we are doing is that we are, like, for example, a group is here, and then we walk and see that the fire is still that side, right? And then also we have like 2 or 3 persons who knows about fire, right? So they're helping us in dealing with this situation.
While there are 2 teams working to contain the fire near Sacuts from both sides, the Vaca Forest Reserve, which is also in the Cayo district, is also burning. The air tanker, which was being used in Belmopan, was also scheduled to fly over the vast area from the Maya Flats airstrip. The Vaca Forest Reserve is located north of the Chiquibul National Park, and fires in that area have created large gusts of smoke that cover Benque Viejo and Socots. Reporting for News 5, I am Isana Cayetano.
$1 million in damages were caused by a raging farm fire on 50 acres of cacao plantation in the south. The fire keeps burning tonight, stretching beyond the villages of Colombia and San Miguel in the Toledo district. The cacao plantation is owned by Serendipity Farm, and one of the owners, Lawrence Chavarria, says that over 15 cacao trees were damaged in the inferno. The fire, he says, was caused by a farmer practicing the slash and burn method.
Approximately 50 acres located right outside of Mufradai, one of the first parcel of land in the San Antonio village. It consists of over 15,000 cacao trees, which are already starting to produce. Last week we already harvested over 3,000 pounds of wet cacao. We had another 4,000 pounds on the farm that was left to harvest. And it has been very devastating with this farm fire coming in from behind the Columbia village, from supposedly one of the slash and burn farmers that does their milpa system. Well, at the moment there is still some fire on the farm and we're trying to control that.
What is the cost of a seedling?
One seedling, it varies. It starts off at, like, I would say $5.
Okay, so it's $5, and you've had these trees in the ground for how many years now?
From 2016 we start off.
Okay, so for 4 years you've been taking care of your farm.
Yes, sir.
What is the estimated value of your farm right now?
We're looking at least $1 million based on the damages here at the moment.
Okay, can you tell us how many trees you have on this farm, more or less?
Approximately 14,000 to 15,000 trees.
Aside from the cacao farm in Quiquejute, fires have been raging in Punta Gorda, where overnight 2 houses were gutted by a blaze. Police and firefighters had to respond in an effort to stop the blaze from spreading to adjacent structures. While the blaze was brought under control, 2 structures in its path were completely destroyed. Officers have also been responding to reports of persons lighting fires, and since a statutory instrument was imposed last week, 3 persons have been charged. Compol Chester Williams says that the police officers have been stretched thin, but they're working to keep everyone safe.
These fires have been a pain in the butt. It is exhausting. It is annoying. There's no word to describe the fires. I watched and read people's horror story about the causes of these fires, people not being able to sleep at night. If a matter of fact, in my own office here, I'm having difficulty breathing because the smoke is here. And we have been doing what we can in collaboration with other organizations, and I must commend the fire department for working with us, as well as the Ministry of Environment, or the Department of Environment. And we also have PAC, who is also on board. And we are trying to do what we can to be able to address these issues. We are stretched extremely thin. But as the commissioner, I do not believe in working my people harder. I believe in working them smarter. And so we have been trying to see what we can do to be able to address these concerns while still ensuring that our officers are not overworked. I honestly believe that when you have officers who are overworked, you don't get much from them. I want to appeal to people. If you see someone lighting a fire, call us, call the fire department, so that we can respond and catch those persons in the act. Most of the time when we respond to these fires, it's because the fire is far gone. The person who may have caused it is no longer around, and it is difficult to find out who caused it. We have made a few arrests in instances where we were able to determine who caused the fire. But again, this is something that we must deal with as a society.
There was another sigh of relief on Tuesday evening when the Ministry of Health confirmed that 3 more persons have recovered from COVID-19, bringing the number of persons to beat the virus to 9. It has been more than 2 weeks since the last confirmed case of the virus. While the 14-day quarantine is over, the state of emergency has been extended for an additional 60 days, which means that several of the regulations are still in place. Today, however, in Belize City, there was a much greater presence of citizens on the streets conducting business. Director of Health Services Dr. Marvin Manzanero made similar observations in his neck of the woods. He says that vast amounts of people were seen on the streets and vehicles resuming on the highway. For Dr. Manzanero, this is alarming. He shared his concerns during the Ask the Experts webcast.
I feel, and the sense that we are getting from the health standpoint is that this week people have been kind of being a little bit more relaxed or laxed in the attitude, or at least the perception we have. We are seeing a vast amount of people on the street. We are supposed to only be having essential services functional this week, but we are not so sure that that is in point of fact what is happening. We are seeing people around the parks, people on the street, along the highway. Lots of cars on the highway now, and so that is getting us very nervous, and we feel that that is a major cause of concern and certainly another headache as we move along.
As you heard, since the beginning of this week, traffic has picked up and movement across the city has increased. So there is concern. Some have thrown caution to the wind, even though COVID-19 remains a real threat to the country. Commissioner of Police says that while restrictions have been eased, police officers remain on the beat, ensuring that the parameters of the state of emergency are adhered to.
It is of concern that we see a number of traffic on the road and in Belize City, and we must realize that many places reopen. Stores are opening longer. Hardware stores are open. And so there are more workers going to work now as opposed to a week, 2 weeks ago. And so, yes, that will create a greater number of persons on the streets. And with more businesses open, then more people will be attracted to those businesses. And so it also causes non-essential people to be on the streets who are going to do their shopping or going to the doctor or going to pay a light bill or a water bill. And so that is what is causing the increase. The police continue to do our part in terms of stopping and interviewing people to ensure that the purpose for which they are on the streets is well within the regulations. And I think that, yes, while we might have a few slip-ups, that the officers have been doing pretty good. I spoke to them yesterday. I sent out a directive yesterday, actually, and again reminded the officers that every vehicle that passes through the checkpoint must be stopped, and the persons on board must be interviewed. And so people might experience longer wait at the checkpoints, but it is our duty to ensure that we stop every vehicle and we interview every person in those vehicles as to where they're going and for what purpose.
Test, test, test. That is what international bodies such as the Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization are advising countries to do to effectively respond to COVID-19, since a number of persons can be asymptomatic. In Belize, close to 1,000 tests have been carried out, and the Director of Health Services, Dr. Marvin Manzanero, says that after discussions with the Central Health Region, a listing of frontline persons was compiled to increase random testing in the coming days.
In discussions with Central Health Region, which deals with the Belize District, I can tell you that there have been random testing that has happened at banking facilities. So elements of that have happened. Some policemen, some BDF have also been randomly screened. It's important that we say that. But we also develop a listing of potential frontline workers that we can go and do random swabbing, if you will, or random testing. Understand that we are not going to be testing everybody, but in our listing we have, for example, people from elderly homes, the caregivers of those people in elderly homes, Coast Guard, Immigration, Customs are in our list, healthcare workers, even if they are not ill, which will include nurses, doctors, pharmacists, lab technicians, bus operators, water taxi operators, tour guides. So what we are doing is developing a listing to look at numbers of persons in these different categories, and then we'll do a random sampling. Also, as we are getting less people that are tied to the last cases, understand that we are not going to be necessarily testing every day. Why? Because we're going to be swabbing people across the country. And if you don't have anybody that's critically ill, remember we are looking for people who are asymptomatic, trying to tease out asymptomatic carriers. Then you won't necessarily have to rush all these samples to Belize City and run them through. So we may be moving towards doing testing every 2 days. The lab has confirmed that they would be in a capacity to run 90 tests daily, at least for the next couple of weeks, to determine what our potential number is out there. We are looking at other testing possibilities, yes, eventually looking at the possibility of testing for antibodies, but we don't have an approved test as yet. That will not replace the current testing procedure that we are doing, which is PCR testing.
According to Dr. Manzanero, viral swabs that have been ordered for some time should be in the country by now. This, along with the reactions donated by the Pan American Health Organization, will make it possible for 14,000 more tests to be carried out.
Our swabs, because we had a little bit of a delay, they didn't arrive on the flight on Saturday. They should have arrived or are arriving on the flight today. The ventilators that were pending to come in also arrived via ship. They didn't come through the usual route of the plane, so that's something that I think is positive from our end. The reagents that Bowen and Bowen is donating have not arrived. They are arriving in May. And again, this is not necessarily things that are easy or difficult to get. You have to deal with the logistics of how it gets here, but you also have to deal with the fact that these are items that are on a wait list from the production company that all countries are buying from. So it's not only a question of the finances. As is, we would have the ability to, with the reactions from PAHO, that they are donating a total of 14,000. So that would give you an idea that you could potentially test up to 14,000 people.
We'll have more on COVID-19 later in the newscast. Coming up, license to LPG importers runs out in 24 hours as the first shipment arrives to the Belize National Company. A few days ago, we heard from the Prime Minister that government is low on money. The public service, which accounts for one of the government's highest bills, has experienced delays in salaries. Today, the Financial Secretary Joseph Wade issued a memo on government's cost-saving measures at this time of financial difficulties. The measures affect wages and salaries for the period of May 1st, 2020 to April 2021. There will be no increments for public officers in that period, and contract officers will not see any increases in salaries or in benefits. As it relates to housing and entertainment allowances, that will be reduced by 25%, and contract officers will get a 50% discount for heads of departments and CEOs. As you know, contract officers are paid much better than open vote workers. They will get a reduction in gratuity from 20 to 15%. The measures are expected to yield a savings of up to 5%. The first shipment of liquid petroleum gas purchased by the National Gas Company arrives in Big Creek on Thursday, and final preparations are underway to offload its inaugural freight coming from the U.S. Gulf Coast. But the official start of business for the newly formed public-private concern is not without controversy, as there is presently a legal challenge that is before the Supreme Court, which was filed by 3 LPG importers, including Zgas, Grupo Tomza, and BeWell. Despite an application for an injunction being denied by Chief Justice Michelle Arana, an appeal has been filed. But the National Gas Company is proceeding with the start of its business, which, according to General Manager Dr. Gilbert Canton, will level the playing field for LPG importation and retailing in the country.
This is exciting times for us right now. We finally got the facility down in Big Creek at the level where we can receive a shipment. The shipment is going to, first shipment ever to come into Belize through the port by marine, by ship. Is going to be coming in tomorrow. Actually, the ship should be here about 10 o'clock tomorrow, and we're in the process of getting all the procedures ready to unload that safely for the first time. So it's a big event for us. You know, this has been a project that's been in the work for many years now, and it's coming to fruition at this point in time. So we're very excited about getting it done. You know, it's going to provide this country with the energy security that it needs, and it's going to have some transparency in pricing and control over quality. So I think it's going to be a big move for Belize. Yeah.
It has been met nonetheless with some objection from the established players, so to speak, the companies that were operating locally in terms of the acquisition and, of course, the retail of butane specifically in the country. Where are we in terms of that particular either challenge or the position that those other importers have taken?
Yes, you know, there's been a lot of that being discussed, especially in the media and in other places, you know, around. And it is a good, it is an issue that needs to be discussed. Basically and fundamentally, the change that is going to occur in the supply chain of LPG coming to Belize is really in the transportation sector and the importation. Over the years, all the LPG has been coming basically from 3 of the terminals in Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, and coming across the border in Belchor, right? On a daily basis, trucks come in. What this project is doing is changing that now to have the importation coming through a fixed point in Big Creek and at with larger load levels, and also at a shorter distance from the U.S. Gulf Coast. It doesn't have to go through the Panama Canal, come all the way, and then truck to Guatemala. That is a fundamental change. Everything else beyond that remains the same. So all the investment that these companies, or any company that's in the LPG business in Belize has, is still functional in the sense that they will still be getting product into their tanks and then distributing out of those tanks to the rest of the downstream part of it, right, to the retail sector of it.
In responding to statements made in an interview given by attorney Audrey Matura, the managing director of the National Gas Company told News 5 Today that with the exception of a business tax, it is still required to pay all other duties, including the general sales tax and environmental tax. The company, he reiterated, will be returned to the government of Belize at the end of the 15-year contract.
I don't think there's any victims in this case. We're sticking a pin in the supply chain in terms of the exactly where the product comes into Belize for the same reasons I mentioned before, for energy security, for price transparency, for quality control, and to create a level playing field downstream of the importation sector. The three companies, NGC, backing up a little bit, NGC in late last year issued a tender for supply to the port. We offered this to the three companies also, that they could come in and they can actually bid on this on the supply to the marine terminal in Big Creek. Their ships pass Belize all the time and route to their different terminals, so it made sense that they could come in, or they could bring it the same way they want and deliver it to the terminal in Belize. So they could have been active participants in the supply chain. They were not ruled out completely from importation. It was just a different modality of how they wanted or could participate in it. So there's really no victims. They choose not to participate. We had 4 bids that came in, and we issued, the successful bidder was a company called Carib Trading LPG. They trade throughout the region. They deliver to Honduras in Botan, they deliver to Chevron in Honduras, they deliver throughout the whole of the Caribbean. They're a huge player, and they were the ones that were successful to the bid. So what the transparency and pricing now is going to be basically that we're going to be indexed among Bellevue indexed out to the U.S. Gulf Coast, and then there's a margin that was bidded as who had the lowest margin to deliver that product to Belize. That's how it works now. We just want to make it clear to everybody that this is really a huge investment in public infrastructure that's needed in this country. It belongs to the government of Belize. We are only facilitating it as private sector by being having the technical capabilities and the financial resources to put this project together. But ultimately, in 15 years, when it turns over to the government of Belize and the people of Belize gets a $60 million modern state-of-the-art facility that belongs to the people of Belize. This is just a modality of getting to that point for some necessary infrastructure in the country. You know, it's not like this is a private sector entity that's getting a monopoly to run forever and ever and make oodles of money. It's not that at all.
Earlier this weekend, the San Pedro Town Council issued its own regulations in terms of opening hours for businesses on the island. While all but one measure fell outside of the parameters set by Statutory Instrument Number 62, the issue raised concerns because the national state of emergency applies to the entire country, San Pedro included. The San Pedro Mayor, Daniel Guerrero, made the announcement on Tuesday following a meeting of the Emergency Operations Center on the island. Today, Commissioner of Police Chester Williams told News 5 that the measures implemented in San Pedro are inconsistent with the national state of emergency. They are illegal and not enforceable. Compa Williams says that Minister Heredia has been informed and the issue has been rectified.
We have one country. We have one central government. We currently have one state of emergency proclamation and one regulation that governs that state of emergency proclamation. And that proclamation and regulations cover the entire country of Belize. And as such, it is incumbent on the police throughout the country of Belize to enforce those regulations as stipulated in Regulation 62. In terms of what is being proposed in San Pedro, those, as far as I'm concerned, are unenforceable. And I have had that discussion with Mr. Noble and have directed him that he should only be policing the regulations as outlined in Regulation 62 and nothing else. I must say that I had spoken to the minister this morning, Mr. Heredia. He was the one who reached out to me, and we discussed the matter. And he is in agreement with me that what has been proposed in San Pedro cannot go through, and so he has said that he's going to speak to his people and explain to them that they will have to follow the national laws of the country. And so I think that matter can now be put to rest.
Williams says that any sanctions against the San Pedro Town Council would come from the Attorney General's ministry, but the police department will continue to enforce the laws of Regulation 62. One person has been detained in connection with the murder of Julian Ebanks, a resident of the Bainesville area of Hattieville. On Monday morning, Ebanks was gunned down a few yards from his house. As he walked home, police say he was approached by 3 persons, one of whom pulled out a gun and opened fire at him. He was struck multiple times and ended up in a drain. While being rushed in the pan of a police pickup truck, he succumbed. Today, Commissioner Chester Williams told News 5 that investigators believe that his killing was in retaliation for an incident in which Ebanks was accused of setting a man on fire in Mahogany Heights.
Police were called to the Belizean American site, I believe the name of the place is in Hattieville, where they encounter Julian Ebanks, who had gunshot wounds to the body. He was transported to the KHMH and succumbed while being transported. Historical background is that Mr. Ebanks was the prime suspect in a case in Mahogany Heights where a young man was set on fire. I know that the police have interviewed Ebanks in respect to that matter. The virtual complainant then, while he said to the police who did it, he refused to give a statement and to request court action. And so Ebanks could not have been dealt with. We anticipated this would have been the outcome, and it happened. We just need to see what we can do now to investigate and try to find those who are responsible and do what we can to bring them to justice. Persons we suspect, I think we have caught one of them, and we're still looking for 2. But again, getting people to cooperate is always a problem. We just have to keep working at it and see where we go from there.
Kampa Williams also spoke about the gun violence in Dangriga, where a man and woman were injured. On Monday night, just before 8 o'clock, Frederick Coote and Tamara Nunez were inside a house when at least one gunman trained his weapon towards the residence and opened fire. Both Coote and Nunez were struck multiple times, but police say that Coote was the intended target. Commissioner Williams says that the incident was triggered by an ongoing gang feud in that municipality, which they are closely monitoring.
We're also monitoring 2 groups in Dangriga that are seemingly want to restart the issue in Dangriga. You would know that last year there were a number of gang-related incidents in Dangriga, and we had done certain things with a view to control and contain the problem. But we're seeing now that those 2 groups are going at it again. Let me say to them that we are monitoring, and if it is that we see the problem persists between them, do not feel like only Belize City is amenable to state of emergency. It can go anywhere across the country, and we're not going to tolerate no gang member, especially now, to believe that they will hold the masses of our people hostage. It is not going to work. The incident I'm speaking about in terms of the gang-related incident in Dangriga, a woman and a male person were shot. And again, the shooter indiscriminately just opened fire on a house, not knowing who or what the bullet will catch. Similar to what we were seeing in Belize City before we went into the state of emergency. Those senseless acts cannot be tolerated. We have an idea who those persons are who did it. They are in custody. But we're trying to see if we'll be able to gather sufficient to be able to lay charges against them.
Police have made an arrest in the murder of Walter Usher. Usher was killed on February 23rd in Belize City. Evian Murillo has been charged with Usher's murder. Murillo is also facing charges of attempted murder, dangerous harm, and use of deadly means of harm upon Joyce Edwards. Usher was targeted by 2 gunmen on motorcycle while he was traveling in a car along with Edwards. The other person charged in the February murder is Dion White. White has also been charged for aggravated assault on a 3rd person, Gregory Williams, who was inside the vehicle but escaped unhurt. After the break, the police department gets another donation in the fight against COVID-19.
You're riding a horse. You're riding a horse where you meet the black howler monkeys face to face. You're not dreaming. You'll never forget this. Belize's Authentic 5, one epic experience. Plan your trip and visit Belize.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, healthcare providers are singled out as frontline workers who are working around the clock to keep the public safe. But the police department is also on the forefront of the fight against the virus, as they're responsible for enforcement of the state of emergency. On Tuesday, the Lord Ashcroft COVID-19 Relief Fund donated an additional $60,000 to the Belize Police Department to assist in the purchasing of gloves, face shields, and masks for its officers. This latest donation is in addition to a sum of $15,000 already donated to the department for the purchasing of face shields. Belize Bank's Chief Operations Officer, Martin Marshallek, handed over the most recent check to Williams.
I want to say thanks to the Michael Ashcroft Relief Fund and Belize Bank, as well as Atlantic Bank, SSB, Benny's, for the contribution that they have given to us since we enter into the state of emergency. You know, as security forces, we require a lot in terms of PPEs. I know the government have been procuring PPEs, but what they have procured is for the health workers. And so we, the security forces, we have to see how we can procure our own PPEs, and these things come with a cost. So we have been able to raise funds through these organizations that I have called to purchase. Each officer now have a face shield. Each officer have been issued with a box of gloves. Each officer gets their face mask, because the mask must go under the shield. And these things are very, very costly. I can tell you that we got 200,000 pieces of gloves, and that costs over $80,000 alone. We should be getting another 200,000 pieces between today or tomorrow.
There's more on the COVID-19 situation. The government continues to encourage social distancing and proper hygiene to prevent the spread of the virus. A motion to extend the state of emergency for an additional 60 days has been passed by the House of Representatives and approved by the Senate. It is expected that at least 3 more persons will be declared recovered over the coming weekend. But while they have officially recovered, it does not mean that they have developed immunity to the novel coronavirus. In today's Ask the Experts webcast, Dr. Marvin Manzanero explains that the possibility of a recovered patient contracting the disease again is very real.
You will note also that it's been 16, 17 days since we last announced the last 4 cases. We are in the process of reswabbing all of these last 4 cases to see whether they have recovered or not. Our perception is that by Friday of this week, we should be having 3-4 more persons out of those 7 recovered. That recovered notion is something that we need to be very careful about, because we say somebody has recovered when you have 2 negative COVID-19 tests, but we want to make sure that people are in point of fact not going to be having any further viral shedding. So eventually we will have to come back to these persons and reswab them again. Just reading a story earlier of somebody who has tested positive after having was initially negative, positive, then negative, then positive, then negative and positive again. Not in Belize, but that's part of the ongoing dynamics that we have in terms of COVID-19. So all those patients that have been deemed to have recovered, we need to understand that they still need to take the necessary precautions. They still need to be able to use a mask, use all the necessary precautions, assuming that they can still be infecting others. Understand also that there is some literature that clearly indicates that doesn't seem that everybody develops immunity. If that is the case, then that means that the patient is going to get reinfected again or can potentially get reinfected again because you have not developed immunity to be able to stem off another wave of an infection.
In the state of Quintana Roo, Mexico, 711 persons tested positive for COVID-19 as of today. In the neighboring subdivision of Otonpi Blanco, of which Chetumal is a part of, 17 persons have tested positive for the disease. 4 persons have died, while 7 persons have recovered. Here in Belize, borders are closed and the state of emergency remains in effect for an additional 60 days. But according to Dr. Marvin Manzanero, there is a high-risk case in Corozal linked to a person who illegally crossed the border into Chetumal.
The overall Quintana Roo state is following the same pattern as the rest of Mexico is, which is increasing numbers, and they are not expected to peak until the end of May. That's important that we understand that, so that people should not be in a hurry to get across the border. That is another headache that I think we need to highlight. We are noticing that people are still either trying to smuggle themselves into Chetumal or smuggle themselves back into Belize. That's a very touchy situation. We have a high-risk case right now in Corozal, who apparently was in Chetumal, of course illegally because the border is closed. That's a situation that we really need to take a grasp of. That should not be happening. Chetumal doesn't have that many cases. Our number is similar to the ones we have in Belize, but the overall state of Quintana Roo, particularly Cancun, Playa del Carmen areas, have a significant and growing number of cases.
Research and scientists have yet to produce a cure or vaccine for COVID-19. While the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has not approved any drugs for the treatment, researchers released some good news about a possible treatment for the novel coronavirus on Wednesday. There is evidence that an experimental drug might help patients recover quicker from the infection. Director of Health Services Dr. Marvin Manzanero today spoke of possible treatments.
Recent studies would suggest that hydroxychloroquine doesn't seem to be as effective as it was initially thought to be. As a matter of fact, one of the warnings now is that you may actually have more detrimental effect with the use of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, so that we are asking that those elements of the guidelines be reevaluated and see if we need to take it out. Same thing with lopinavir, ritonavir, which we never used in Belize, not for COVID-19, but again, the newer suggestion is that it doesn't seem to work. We are following what other countries are doing. If remdesivir is another medication that seems to show some benefit. We don't have that available in Belize. And there's a Mexican cohort using steroids and a medication used for rheumatoid arthritis that we are also following closely. We have a small study sample that is showing some potential benefit. But again, this is all a work in progress.
When we come back, the Ministry of Education explains the new measures for the school year. Schools across the country remain closed, likely for the rest of the academic year. So the Ministry of Education has developed an online program to keep students at all levels engaged in learning. So what about teachers who are working to obtain CPDs and student teachers working on obtaining their licenses? The ministry has designed a temporary procedure that enables teachers to submit applications for licenses online. Deputy Chief Education Officer Dr. Newlin Villanueva explains.
In the case of student teachers, the external assessment would normally have been done during that period of school closure. Right. However, those students would have done the bulk of their work to qualify them to be certified. And so what the ministry is planning to do is to look at the internal assessment grades, because there is an internal assessment and then there's the external assessment. And while we may not be able to visit teachers, we will do an external assessment based on their portfolios, their lesson plans and unit plans that they've developed as part of that internship course. Although at the secondary level, a lot of our teachers would be engaged with student learning, at the primary level, it's not so much. And so what we've asked teachers to do is to use this opportunity to gain continuing professional development hours. As you know, our teachers with full licenses are required to do 120 hours of CPD within a 5-year period. And so this is an opportunity to focus on that. And I'm very excited to share that the ministry actually has developed a number of CPD courses, online CPD courses. There are 2 right now that we're advertising. There is one on called Thriving in Uncertain Times that I'm really excited about. It says making your well-being a priority, and what that will cover is several areas of wellness: mental, emotional, physical, and financial. The 2 courses that I mentioned are available for teachers at all levels. We have a list of pre-approved CPD courses on the website as well. Because of the regulations, it does not allow a teacher to be teaching within our system without a valid teacher's license. Okay. And so that's one of the essential services that the ministry has to keep going. What we've asked teachers to do is to complete the application form, which can be found on our website. And that application form can then be downloaded and sent along with the appropriate documents to the email address of the district education manager.
The Deputy Chief Education Officer, Dr. Newlin Villanueva, also addressed the matter of Belizean students who are stuck overseas and unable to return home except under special circumstances because borders remain closed. Most universities are now doing online studies, but costs relating to accommodation still apply for the students on scholarships by the government. According to Dr. Villanueva, discussions are currently underway to determine how the ministry can help the students.
I think the first priority for us are those students that we have right now that are on scholarships and grants from us. So we've been discussing how we can continue to support them, perhaps where the resources might not be there for them to remain in the U.S. With the cost of accommodations and so on. A lot of the universities are moving courses online, so there's a possibility that they would be able to do online, which would reduce their costs. And even for our students, if there's an opportunity for that, then that can be considered. And it's not only the current students, but we have a number of scholarships that we offer every year. And so we've been discussing, well, how will we support, given perhaps reduced budgets? How do we continue to support tertiary education, because it's so key to our development?
Dr. Villanueva also spoke on promotions and graduations in primary and high school. The ministry has decided that students will be promoted, though exams will not be taken. Dr. Villanueva says that while the education rules are specific to primary schools, for secondary schools, promotion and graduations are decided by the school's academic policies and assessment practices.
In the case of primary schools, students shall normally be allowed to progress each year to the next grade level, and that schools shall develop special assistance programs for students who do not meet some of the expected outcomes at the end of the grade or division. So repetition really should be an expectation, not the rule, but an exception, right? So it really should be not applied when students are maybe barely there and they have the opportunity to really bring up. This third section of that rule actually says that a primary school shall be required to keep on its enrollment any student who has completed the final year of primary schooling but who does not meet the standard for primary certification, provided that the student is less than 14 years of age. Now at the secondary level, it's completely different. The regulation says that at the end of the year, secondary schools shall determine, according to their academic policies and assessment practices, students who are to be promoted to the next grade level, and in the case of students who are in the final year of studies, those who have successfully completed the program of studies and are to be certified. So in no way at the secondary level is there automatic promotion and graduation, and the Ministry of Education cannot impose that. However, what we have asked the managing authorities, since they're the authority on this, to do is to look at their regulation. In the IT vet system, none of the promotion or graduation or certification, as they call it, cannot apply. These students, the trainees, are expected to complete their practical and on-the-job training whenever school reopens.
Coming up after the break, business and the economy in the Caribbean amid the COVID pandemic. We'll hear from PM Mia Motley.
As stay-at-home orders will gradually loosen across the country and you slowly go back to doing what you do best,
Port of Belize Limited, a port with a global perspective.
Women leaders across the globe have shown to be the most responsive in battling the COVID-19 pandemic. In countries such as New Zealand, Belgium, and Finland, they have acted proactively in the decision-making process and are better prepared in respective medical gear for health workers and the population. Today, the CNN's Christian Amanpour interviewed the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. Mottley is the bright star in the Caribbean and is also currently steering the CARICOM ship as the Caribbean navigates through the murky waters of the pandemic. Mottley took a number of questions from Amanpour on the situation in Barbados, but she also spoke on the economic and environmental crisis facing the Caribbean, which is dependent on tourism.
I just wanted to ask you how your country's doing in terms of infections, in terms of deaths, and to ask you whether I think you've had some quite severe lockdowns and how that's working there.
Thank you very much, Christiane, for having me. We are fighting up not just here in Barbados, but in the Caribbean. At this point in time, I'm actually chairing CARICOM, which is a member state organization of 15 countries from Bahamas in the north to Guyana and Suriname in the south, from Barbados in the east to Belize in the west. And I can pretty much speak on behalf of all of us that this has been the most destabilizing event for our countries, probably since World War II. I mean, we've heard you speak about that, and others in the UK speak about the fact that this is for them similarly the most destabilizing event. Each of our countries, regrettably, has cases. Each of our countries, in our own case, we have just about 80, and we have just about 7 deaths. Half of the people, just under half, have recovered. But alongside with the pandemic is the very real result of people being able to live and to eat. And I notice it's not just the Caribbean. I've seen stories coming out of Africa and Asia and elsewhere. And this is a real balance. And listening just now to your last interview, both interviews, it is clearly a problem across the world. Our situation is perhaps a little more unique because we suffer a number of risks. One, we are a highly indebted region, largely because we are perhaps the most travel-dependent and trade-dependent region in the world, with almost half of our GDP coming directly and indirectly, and our jobs, from tourism. Secondly, we are also on the cusp of the climate crisis. In fact, we are 4 weeks away from the beginning of the hurricane season. But what is little spoken about is that the climate crisis has also resulted in droughts and sargassum weed, which has meant a number of our hotel establishments and restaurants were already suffering before this pandemic. And now we add to this global pandemic. So that this is a peculiar moment for Caribbean states, not just Barbados. And it is one in which we hope we can summon the rest of the global community to recognize that it is now more than ever that we need to recognize that global leadership is needed and that we need to accept that these islands, as well as those in the South Pacific, are vulnerable.
You can catch the entire interview following tonight's newscast. In 2019, an extreme drought devastated crops in the north and south. Farmers lost millions of dollars, and this prompted the government to roll out a financial aid package for farmers. The Food and Agriculture Ministry established a Belize Agriculture Farm Registry, a list of established farmers that received financial assistance. $1.1 million were made available to assist more than 1,000 cattle farmers and more than 600 vegetable farmers. This month, a more severe drought developed in several countries in the Caribbean. In Belize, a short-term drought until the end of May is evolving in West and Central Belize. The adverse effects of this extreme drought are already being felt with fires burning out of control. Farmers are expected to also be affected, which is why the Ministry of Food and Agriculture have made an early application for a $25 million loan from the World Bank to assist farmers. Minister Godwin Holt spoke during the Senate sitting on Tuesday about the assistance that farmers would receive during the COVID-19 pandemic and the imminent drought.
But let's get to COVID. Do you know
that because of the drought, the ministry engaged the World Bank for a loan of $25 million US. I mentioned that in this Senate already. And that $25 million is well advanced. These institutions take time. But we are working that fund for drought assistance to the farmers to be able to improve their ability to maintain their crops and their animals through any subsequent dry period. That money will not be available maybe until September or October. It's beyond our control, the speed at which the World Bank works. But at the same time, there's a $21 million which comes from the Climate Resilient Infrastructure Program called CRIP. And I don't mean the gang CRIP. It's called CRIP. And the Prime Minister mentioned repeatedly that that money was going to be expedited to be part of this social assistance. I encouraged him, Prime Minister, the farmers need assistance for COVID as well. They're not begging, they don't have their hands stretched, but if they can't sell their products and their vegetable rotten, they won't get any money, so they can't plant back, so we need some assistance to them. He has agreed that some $14 million out of that fund will go into that, which hopefully will be available no later than 3 weeks at the outset, maybe 4 weeks. From that part of the fund, while the $25 million for the drought remains intact. So it's not accurate to say that there's no assistance and nothing is being done. And then, finally, we engage the central bank with all the stakeholders in the farming community to look at what we could do as a relief for those who had loans.
This week, countries around the world are commemorating the 18th annual Vaccination Week in the Americas. The celebration is being held under the theme, Love, Trust, Protect, Get Vax. The importance of vaccination was highlighted today by Nurse Administrator Sharon Cooper Espinosa during Ask the Experts. Cooper Espinosa encouraged members of the public to get vaccinated against diseases, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic.
We are currently vaccinating against 13 diseases. We are in discussion for introducing 2 other new vaccines, the rotavirus vaccine and the pneumococcal vaccine. Last year, I believe it was, we had some cases of diarrhea and vomiting, and some of them were in fact rotavirus, due to rotavirus. Across the country, we are administering vaccines. The vaccination program, the vaccination services continue.
So if you haven't, you are encouraged to get your vaccine. And that's the news. Don't forget that tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/News5Live. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us. And from all of us here at News 5, please remember to wash your hands, keep your social distance, stay home, and stay safe. Good night.